On Saturday several 40,000 runners are due to get portion in the London Marathon Runner. But can marathon runner fleeing do more than damage rather than nice? Barry Trott, 57, was approaching the end of his first marathon runner in Bilbao, Spain, in 2014, while his dewatering rotated in flash disease. In just a few miles leftward to the complete link, Barry, of Bognor Regis, in Sussex, compressed abruptly and begun vomit. He quickly found oneself enclosed by paramedics, his racing above. I mind down there must be several precautionary signs how tell, halt, up you get to, how spot, but down there wasn't. I didn't see it upcoming, he told. Indifference, Sophie Everett, of Chester, was capable to complete her first marathon runner, in Chester in 2013, in spite since a whining, blade-like ache in her feet. But weeks after the ache had not leftward and she was undiagnosed in plantar fasciitis, a persistent trauma to the leg and heel piece. So were these unfortunate experiences, or are marathons in fact dangerous for our public health? Marathons are a large natural problem for our bodies, says Dr. Mark Pond, a sports scholar at Liverpool John Moores College who teaching how motion affects the tissues of the flesh, such as musculature, bones, tendons and ligaments. Though in routine runners they tiredness the flesh to this edge of creature at hazard of harm and get weeks to restore of, he says. Making them requires suitability and air conditioning through the flesh. But if the is constructed up too rapidly above use, injuries, such as tibia splints or distress fractures, can happen. Thou include to enable the flesh to adjust to heat, Dr. Pond says. Thou d wish to get who to slowly boat train for it above a time of months, so the flesh has the opportunity to adjust in regulation of the further loading it has to manage in. The hazard of trauma is big for human beings. Someone, how is since these factors combination reason more than irregular effect on our joints. This largest at hazard man would checkmark such 3 boxes, their obesity, sharply growth, their learning to manage in making a marathon runner, and include several question in how their flesh is verified, Dr. Pond says. But which on for human beings who get the period to get ready correctly, do such miles not always get a duty on things such as our joints and some components of the flesh? It appears no, Dr. Pond says. Since time the marathons themselves are an enormous problem for our bodies, if learning for them is made correctly it is potential to reinforce and state not just our musculature, but as well our joints and though our bones, as portion of the ADAPT trial, you would apparently gain, he says. Thou d perhaps include improve bones, thou d perhaps miss way, yours vascular framework is departure to be improve. And in regulation of joints and things love how, their departure to be caused. In a difficult racing on a hot and wet date, marathon runners can Mississippi up to 4 persons liters, 7 pints, of liquid via sweaty and expiration. That puts them at hazard of dewatering and hypothermia, wherever the flesh's heat is much over regular. Largest of the collapses thou'll see on Saturday will be related in above heating, Greg White, Prof of Sport Scientific at Liverpool John Moores College says. To hinder the runners should hold correctly hydrated by potable, slight, frequently and previous, he says. Several expert alert versus take on too lot fluid, since in excess cases it can conduct to water supply poisoning, a potential deadly state. Professor White told the was really unusual and human beings were far more than potential to end up dewatered. This initial way we fight the above heating is via evaporation pot losing, that requires fluids, he adds. Belly cramps and diarrhea can as well hit for marathons since of how length distance fleeing can violate digestive. That can occur to human beings who include hydrocarbon drinks or gels for the at first period for a marathon runner, Dr. Stephen Mears, a lecturer in sport and workout food at Loughborough College says. He says such who schedule to get these for a marathon runner should at first practice take them by racing facility to see how their bodies respond. In several cases human beings include dead for marathons, but deaths of marathon runners are very uncommon. Above the 10 years, 59 of the runners had a cardiac detention, wherever the cardiac stops work, and 42 of these human beings dead. Dr. David Oxborough, who has investigated how marathons influence the cardiac, says while deaths for marathons do occur, they tend to happen in human beings who had diagnosed cardiac problems, each in older human beings or in such in legacy facility. Thou re-implement, you are setting yours cardiac by tension, and thus if it is discredited in several extent it could potential reason you to include a cardiac occasion, he says. These deaths are uncommon. Dr. Oxborough says they emphasize why it is essential for human beings to get a public health verify up of a physician up making a marathon runner. Marathons are a big problem for our bodies. Eventually any of the public health risks are more than rather than outweighed by the benefits, expert tell. There's no question if you expose all of how difficult job to slowly state yours flesh thou departure to gain, out of a dark of a question, Dr. Pond says. But experts say the core, especially for untrained runners, is to not do too lot too quickly, pursue a nice learning schedule, and hear to yours flesh. If you refuge teammate any fleeing for a time, you requirement to go out and see how far you can go for a length go at first, Dr. Pond adds. Sophie Everett has not run with her at first and recent marathon runner since of the continuing ache in her feet, but Barry Trott has with lost on to full several marathons. He told it was the private problem of marathon runner fleeing how reasoned him to do more than I can run else range and shirk off the learning and get about and it wouldn't be too poor, but if you don't do it correctly for a marathon runner he's terrible, he's large, he's hard, he's a bit terrible and thou ve got to get it order.